Dr. Linnea Shaw stood at the edge of the triage platform, her heart pounding in time with the low hum of the medical scanners behind her. This was supposed to be a straightforward humanitarian mission, a scheduled stop at the neutral outpost, known as Station Kalindra, located on the far edge of the Orban system. She was here to offer medical assistance to refugees from both the Human Alliance and the Jalasi Empire who had been displaced by ongoing border skirmishes. She had spent the last 20 hours tending to an unending line of wounded soldiers and civilians, distributing supplies, and stabilizing critical patients who came staggering into her makeshift ward. Yet all that urgency seemed to dissolve into the background as she focused on the figure lying unconscious on the table. A towering alien warrior with deep blue scales and a ridged crest that ran from the top of his head to the nape of his neck lay strapped to a diagnostic bed. Jalasi physiology was familiar to Linnea in theory. She had studied it extensively at the Alliance Interspecies Medical Academy. Yet seeing a severely injured Jalasi soldier so close, feeling his labored breathing against the palm of her gloved hand, was a different reality altogether. He was nearly 6.5 feet tall, built like a living fortress, broad shoulders, muscular arms lined with protective scales, and a face marked by a strong jaw that ended in faintly visible fangs. The readings on the monitor blinked a stark warning. He was hemorrhaging internally, and his own artificial blood supplements were failing to integrate with his system. She consulted the outpost's lead doctor, Kareen, a Tsari with translucent skin and 4 slender arms. Kareen's expression, as far as Linnea could interpret Tsari facial cues, was grim. "We've tried every synthesized Jalasi blood supply we have. He's rejecting them all. Something about his immunological profile is unique." A row of Kareen's eyes blinked in unison. Commander Rykar is a high-ranking soldier in the Jalasi Empire. Word is that he led multiple campaigns on the eastern frontier. He's dangerous, but we cannot just let him die. Linnea had sworn an oath to save lives, no matter the species. Yet she knew from personal experience how dangerous Jalasi warriors could be. She'd lost her youngest brother during a Jalasi assault on the freedman colony 2 years ago. Thoughts of that memory made her chest tighten, but she pushed the feeling aside. War was war. Individuals were individuals, and she was a doctor. The priority now was to keep the patient alive, this patient who might have fought on the other side of the battlefield that took her brother's life. The test from the outpost lab returned only one glimmer of hope, a suggestion that human blood might be compatible with Rykar's physiology. The notion was almost unthinkable. Transfusions between different species were typically a last resort, especially cross-species as genetically dissimilar as humans and Jalasi. But the readouts indicated a small overlap in antigens between this particular Jalasi soldier and a very specific type of human blood. It was a 1 in a billion anomaly. Linnea's mind raced. They had a single pack of that blood type available, belonging to a human soldier who had died from catastrophic injuries upon arriving at the station. The soldier's name had been Roman Delgado. He was barely 22, and he'd volunteered to be an organ donor. That meant his blood was still in decent condition after extraction. If Linnea used it on Rykar, the chance of success was minimal, and the moral quandary profound. Could she justify giving the blood of a human soldier, someone who fought for the Alliance, to save a Jalasi commander who might still harbor lethal intentions? She hesitated, glancing at the unconscious alien. His breathing was ragged, veins visibly pulsing at his temples. Kareen hovered over the bed, adjusting the life support to keep him stable. Time was running out. Another jolt of adrenaline surged through Linnea when an alarm signaled a sudden drop in Rykar's vital signs. If she didn't act, he would die within minutes. Regardless of personal resentments or species-based hostilities, her job was to preserve life. She made her decision. "Prepare the transfusion lines," she said quietly, stepping away from the bed. "We're going to try the human blood supply from Delgado." Kareen's elongated fingers flicked at the control panel, but his expression remained uncertain. "Are you absolutely sure?" "No," Linnea admitted, "but we have no other option. We can't let him die if there's a chance. Initiate the transfusion. The process was tense and surreal. Linnea hovered, monitoring the drip of red fluid as it traveled down a narrow tube into Rikar's vascular system. On the outpost's overhead speakers, an announcement repeated that more refugees were inbound, that the station's resources were critically strained, that the protective shield around the facility might need to be reinforced if further hostilities erupted in the sector. Every piece of background noise, every alert, every call for help seemed far away compared to the immediate crisis in front of her. She watched the trembling of Rikar's chest as the first few drops of human blood entered his veins. For the first minute, it seemed as if the alien body might reject it outright. His muscles spasmed, and she suspected a violent reaction was coming. Then, to her amazement, his breathing evened out. The oxygen saturation on his monitor rose from a dire 40% to a more sustainable 65, then 70, then 80. The machines beeped frantically in surprise, as if unable to process the improbable data. Kareem's eyes widened, and the sorry doctor turned to Linnea with a mixture of disbelief and relief. He's stabilizing. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. Linnea breathed out slowly, resisting the urge to slump to the floor in exhaustion. For a long moment, she simply stared at the alien warrior. He was alive, thanks to her decision and the blood of a human soldier. She wondered if Delgado's family would have wanted it this way, or if they might have preferred that blood remain for another human. Such moral dilemmas had no easy answers. All she could do was abide by her oath. Within hours, Rikar's condition was upgraded from critical to serious. The staff moved him to a quieter corner of the station's infirmary, behind partition walls that offered a measure of privacy. Linnea was obliged to file a report detailing the procedure. The station's alliance supervisor, Commander Hollins, a stern woman with iron-gray hair, marched up to Linnea with anger etched into the lines of her face. You performed an unapproved cross-species transfusion on a known enemy combatant, Hollins snapped. There could be political fallout for this, not to mention the potential risk if he recovers and becomes violent. Linnea's response was steady. We're bound by interspecies medical ethics. This is a neutral station, and I did what was necessary to save a life. Hollins fixed her with a glare. You've always had a bleeding heart, Dr. Shaw, but sometimes that compassion can cost us dearly. Don't forget that if you nurse a viper back to health, it might bite you all the same. That remark, however, did not shake Linnea's resolve. She stood her ground. He's a patient under my care. I won't apologize for practicing medicine. A few hours later, while Linnea was tending to other wounded, she received an urgent call from Kareem. Rikar had regained consciousness. Her pulse kicked up as she hurried through the corridors, medical bag slung over her shoulder. She found the Jalasi sitting up in bed, strapped loosely at his torso and arms, a precaution the staff had instituted. The scales on his arms caught the overhead light, giving off a dark sheen. His gaze whipped to her the instant she entered. He bared his fangs slightly, letting out a low, rumbling sound that she recognized as a Jalasi growl. She braced herself. "Where am I?" he hissed, the words in heavily accented standard, thick with an alien timbre. "You're at Station Kalendra, in the Orvan system. Do you remember what happened?" Linnea kept her voice even, trying not to stare too obviously at the medical lines or the bandages that covered the plasma ports at his side. Rikar's pupils narrowed. "I remember. Conflict. My vessel was ambushed near the border. Then pain." His gaze shifted to the tube that was still connected to an line, feeding him a final measure of supportive fluid. "What have you done to me?" "I saved your life," Linnea said. "Your body was rejecting every form of synthetic blood. We had one last option." His anger flared, lips curling. "Do not speak in riddles, human. What did you put into me?" She forced herself to meet his stare. "Human blood." He froze, his expression almost feral. For several tense moments, Linnea thought he might lunge at her. "Human blood?" he repeated, as though the phrase was poison. His ridged crest twitched in disgust. "You contaminate me." Linnea refused to flinch, though his hostility cut her deeply. especially since she had poured all her skill and empathy into saving him. That contamination is what's keeping you alive, she replied. Without it, you'd have died. I wasn't thrilled about the procedure either, but we had no other options. Rykar made a strangled sound, somewhere between a snarl and a groan. She could see the disbelief and revulsion in his eyes, as well as something else. A trace of conflicted gratitude, perhaps. There was no telling what cultural taboo he might be violating by having another species' blood in his veins. Jolasi tradition often viewed bodily integrity as sacred. He turned his face away from her. "This is an abomination," he muttered. "I should have been allowed to die with honor rather than live as this." "Glad to see your survival instincts are so robust," Linnea commented dryly, though her voice trembled slightly with anger. "Since you're stable now, we'll see what the future holds." She left him to recover, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. Her colleagues gave her sympathetic nods, but there was little time for comfort. A massive influx of refugees had arrived at the station, Jolasi and humans alike, many sporting severe injuries. Linnea threw herself back into triage, working overtime to save as many as she could. Between procedures, she caught fleeting glimpses of Rykar on the monitors. He said little to the staff, though the corner of his mouth occasionally twitched with pain or frustration whenever a human nurse entered his bay. Late that night, after hours of nonstop surgery, she sank into a chair by Rykar's bed, unable to keep herself from checking on him. His eyes were closed, but his breathing was calm. She studied his chart and was amazed at the improvements in his vitals. It was almost as if the human blood was not only sustaining him, but somehow enhancing his cellular regeneration. As a doctor, Linnea found it fascinating. As a person, she worried about what it might mean for interspecies relations if rumors spread that a Jolasi commander was turning into something new. Before she left, she reached out to adjust a blanket that had slipped off his broad shoulder. He flinched awake, grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, and then immediately let go. I didn't mean to startle you," Linnea said, heart pounding again. Rykar stared at her, scanning her face. He looked about to speak, then turned away, letting out a quiet exhalation that might have been the alien equivalent of a sigh. She took that as permission to leave him be for the night. In the following days, Station Calendra's tensions escalated. The short supply of resources, the presence of both Jolasi and human refugees, and the ever-present threat of conflict looming outside the station's boundaries created a cauldron of anxiety. Commander Hollins was in constant contact with Alliance higher-ups, trying to secure more funding and protective measures for the station. Meanwhile, Dr. Kareem discovered that the local supply of Jolasi synthetic blood was compromised. There was evidence of sabotage. Linnea began to suspect that Commander Rykar's presence was not a mere coincidence. Someone had wanted him vulnerable on this station at this exact moment. The strangest development, however, was Rykar's transformation. Linnea, conducting follow-up tests, noticed that his muscle tissue was regenerating at an accelerated rate. The color of his scales, once a dusky blue, had deepened and taken on a faint shimmering quality. More disturbingly, he started to exhibit subtle shifts in his behavior, occasional lapses into a trance-like state where he would stare blankly at nothing. Then, upon snapping out of it, he'd recite the conversation happening 3 rooms away. It was as though his senses had expanded to pick up signals well beyond normal Jolasi range. Linnea confronted him in the infirmary. "How are you feeling?" she asked, scanning his pupils with a handheld medical device. He shrugged off her attempts to examine him too closely. "Why do you care?" She pursed her lips. "Because you're my patient. Humor me." He bared his teeth in a semblance of a half-sneer, half-smile. "Better than I have any right to feel. Stronger. Ikan sensatings. My hearing, my sight, even my sense of smell is sharper. It makes no sense. Does your cursed blood do this to all Jolasi?" "It's not cursed. And no, to my knowledge, it shouldn't. Something about your unique genotype is interacting with the human blood. I suspect that's why you survived in the first place. Maybe there's an ancient genetic marker in your lineage that, well, we don't fully understand. But from a purely scientific perspective, it's remarkable. He eyed her warily. Your people have meddled in things they do not comprehend. Look, she said, exasperation in her voice. If you hate this so much, you can still call for a Jalasi extraction team to pick you up. But at least be aware that the same sabotage that nearly killed you once could happen again. We don't even know who orchestrated it or why. He didn't have a snappy retort. Instead, Rykar hopped down from his bed, testing his balance. The monitors beeped in protest, but he ripped away the sensor pads. The station is on the brink of chaos. I've heard how the corridors are filling with refugees, how tensions are rising. It's only a matter of time before a fight breaks out. I won't be caught helpless again. Linnea looked up at him, heart wavering between annoyance at his stubbornness and a grudging admiration for his fortitude. Then let me help. Corrine, and I need more blood samples, more scans, to figure out exactly what's happening to you. With better data, we can protect you from the same sabotage that destroyed the synthetic supply. He crossed his arms, every inch the proud warrior. Very well, human. But do not think my cooperation means I approve of this contamination you've inflicted on me. She rolled her eyes and led him to the scanner bay, where Corrine was waiting. They ran advanced imaging that revealed unorthodox patterns in Rykar's physiology. The transfused human blood wasn't just blending with his own. It seemed to be rewriting portions of his genetic code, bridging the gap between Jalasi and human cell structures. None of the official science they had learned truly accounted for these results. Still, an uneasy sense of wonder took hold of Linnea. She remembered reading obscure theories about a lost civilization that might have seeded compatible genetic markers across different species. They were dismissed as myths in modern xenobiology. Could there be a kernel of truth in them? She wondered if Rykar's ancestors and her own might share an ancient link, one that had lain dormant until an emergency transfusion reactivated it. Hours later, exhausted from the battery of tests, Rykar slumped on a bench, breathing heavily. Linnea was about to hand him a cup of water when a piercing alarm blared through the station's comm systems. "Attention, all personnel," came Commander Hollins's voice, tight with urgency. "Multiple unidentified ships have dropped out of FDL near our perimeter. They've opened fire on our shield array. We believe they're hostile forces using stolen alliance codes. Everyone, brace for possible boarding attempts." Rykar stood at once, the warrior in him surging to the forefront. Linnea felt her stomach twist. If a hostile group boarded, they could be after any number of targets. But something about the sabotage on the blood supply and the suspicious timing made her think that whoever was attacking might be specifically interested in capturing Rykar and the secrets his newly altered biology held. She said as much to Rykar, who curled his hands into fists. "Then we should not let them. I'll fight if I must." Linnea bit her lip, rummaging through a nearby supply closet until she found an old Alliance stun pistol. She handed it to him, albeit reluctantly. "Set it to the incapacitation setting. This is a medical station, not a war zone." His gaze flicked to the pistol. "Still squeamish about lethal force, I see." She bristled. "I've seen too much death already. If we can avoid it, we should." She grabbed a smaller sidearm for herself, one with a mere 3 shots of electromagnetic disruptor ammunition. Better than nothing. A ripple of fear coursed through her. She'd been on the front lines of triage before, but not in an active firefight environment. The memory of losing her brother loomed like a shadow. Station Calendra rocked from a localized explosion. Lights flickered. Overhead panels sparked. The automated voice of the station's AI droned a warning about structural integrity in the docking wing. Hollins's voice returned on the intercom, describing how the attackers, who indeed wore uniforms that might have belonged to an Alliance private security force, were advancing on the medical sector. If they wanted the station's data, or someone specific, the labs and patient wards were prime targets. Corrine, still in the scanning room, rattled instructions to staff members to barricade themselves in secure modules. Another explosion rocked the corridors, and the sound of gunfire echoed from somewhere on the next deck. A group of battered refugees, both humans and Jalasi, took cover behind supply crates, eyes wide with terror. Linnea felt a surge of protective determination. The war, or whatever it was outside, had come here to prey on the weak. She refused to let that happen. Rykar looked at her, a question in his eyes. She nodded once, and they stepped out, arms at the ready. They crept along the corridor, hearing the heavy thud of footsteps approaching. As soon as they turned a corner, they confronted a trio of attackers clad in black tactical gear with a stylized insignia on their shoulders, an emblem that might have once been Alliance, but was now defaced with a slash of red paint. A flash of recognition crossed one of the attackers' faces. He shouted, "That's him!" The Jolasi with the... Before he could finish, Rykar lunged with a speed that made Linnea's heart skip. He struck the man's weapon aside and dropped him with a single blow to the head. The second attacker raised a rifle, but Linnea fired her disruptor, hitting him in the chest. He collapsed, convulsing. The third managed to squeeze off a shot that grazed Rykar's shoulder, sending bluish blood spattering onto the floor. Yet Rykar barely flinched. He closed the distance and slammed the butt of the stun pistol into the attacker's temple. When the hallway fell silent, Linnea rushed to Rykar. "You're hurt," she whispered, seeing the dark fluid that seeped through a tear in his clothing. He brushed it off. "It's superficial," he grunted, though the color in his blood was different. The shade of it was deeper, almost tinted with hints of dark red. Linnea stared, momentarily transfixed. Was his blood changing to a hue reminiscent of human blood? She forced herself to refocus. They had no time to be amazed by biology while the station was under assault. She and Rykar navigated through smoke-filled corridors, hearing sporadic gunfights and the wail of wounded refugees. They rescued a small group of them, guiding them to a safe area behind sealed bulkhead doors. Linnea used her medical passcode to override the security system, creating a temporary shelter. Several times, they encountered pockets of the attackers, who seemed to be combing the station methodically. Each time, Rykar's reflexes proved uncannily fast. He avoided shots that should have at least grazed him. Linnea felt like she was watching someone move an instant ahead of his opponents, as though a sixth sense guided him. When the second wave of attackers converged, one grabbed Linnea, pressing a weapon to her temple. The man hissed, "Stand down, Jolasi, or the good doctor dies." Linnea froze, feeling the cold metal of the gun against her skin. Her heart pounded. She saw the flash of conflict in Rykar's eyes as he raised his pistol, uncertain. She shook her head slightly, signaling him not to risk it. But then the man added, "Hand him over. We're taking him to the facility. The higher-ups want him alive." Facility, Linnea thought. There must be a reference to some clandestine research lab. She felt a wave of fury. They didn't care about the war or any notion of politics. They only wanted Rykar's mutated biology. She clenched her jaw. "What do you want with him?" she demanded, stalling for time. The attacker sneered. "His hybrid potential is worth a fortune. If you only knew how many experiments require fresh genetic stock." He pressed the gun harder against her, but Linnea didn't budge. In that moment, Rykar's shoulders tensed. Linnea realized he was focusing, reading the attacker's micro-movements. Before the man could fire, Rykar dove forward in a blur. The gun discharged, the shot tearing a singe through Linnea's hair as she dropped to the ground. Rykar slammed into the attacker, sending him sprawling. The weapon clattered away. Linnea gasped, rolling aside. She saw two more armed figures rush in from behind, but Rykar pivoted with supernatural speed, disarming the first with a twist of the wrist and striking the second in the jaw. Both went down. Her heart hammered as she scrambled to her feet. You saved me," she managed, swallowing her panic. He turned toward her, breathing hard. "I merely returned the favor." She allowed a quick nod of gratitude. They couldn't linger. An overhead announcement crackled. "Station integrity at risk. All civilians to designated safe zones. Commander Hollins to the control tower. Intruders have accessed the station's data core." That raised a new concern. If the invaders reached the medical data logs, they'd have definitive proof of how Rykar had been saved, including the genetic readouts. The last thing Linnea wanted was for those files to fall into unscrupulous hands. She glanced at him. "We need to secure the lab records." He jerked his head in agreement. They headed for the lab, where Corrine worked. The path there was littered with debris, thick smoke from small fires and wounded refugees. Linnea paused whenever she could to administer basic first aid. Rykar, while impatient at times, never once told her to abandon a civilian. As they pressed on, the station continued to rock from external attacks, but the shield array was holding, for now. Arriving at the lab, they found the door forced open. Inside, Corrine cowered behind an overturned desk while a squad of armed intruders tried to hack into the mainframe. The intruders were the same black tactical gear, the same defaced insignia. Linnea spotted a portable quantum drive in one of their hands, no doubt meant to steal all the data on Rykar's unique condition. She signaled to Rykar, who nodded, adjusting the setting on his stun pistol. They launched a two-pronged assault. Linnea hurled a med supply crate to distract the nearest intruder, then ducked behind an instrument cabinet. Rykar rushed in from the opposite angle, dispatching two of them with fluid strikes. The last intruder flung a concussive grenade, forcing Linnea to dive for cover. Her sidearm skittered across the floor. She could hear Corrine squealing in fear as the sorry doctor tried to shield his eyes. The grenade went off with a deafening crack, sending shock waves through the lab. Ears ringing, Linnea forced herself upright. Smoke stung her lungs. She spotted the final intruder slumped on the ground, apparently knocked back by the blast. Rykar was crouched nearby, breathing heavily. She stumbled over to Corrine, checking for injuries. "You okay?" Corrine blinked several pairs of eyes. "And mostly, if that concussive force was any stronger, we'd be in serious trouble." "That's sorry." Then eyed Rykar, trembling with residual fear. "He's unstoppable." Linnea turned. She could see that Rykar's scales had small cracks along his forearms. Blood seeped from them, but again the color was not purely Jolasi. She ached to examine him properly, but first they had to ensure the lab's data was secure. She hurried to the computer terminal. One look at the flickering screen told her the intruders had partially succeeded. They'd accessed at least some of the genetic profiles. She inserted a high-level encryption key that Commander Hollins had given her for emergencies and initiated a data purge of the sensitive logs. Corrine helped, inputting cryptographic protocols. Together, they managed to wipe the mainframe, leaving no trace of the research on Rykar's transformation. However, they couldn't be sure if the intruders had already transferred a portion of it. The best they could do now was prevent further access. Just when they thought they might have contained the threat, the station's intercom blared one more time. Hollins's voice came through, thick with static. "They've breached the docking wing. We can't hold them here. All essential personnel, evacuate. Repeat, Station Kalendra is compromised." Linnea and Rykar looked at each other grimly. Corrine wrung his hands. "We cannot fight them all off. We must flee." Linnea's chest tightened. Fleeing meant leaving behind countless wounded refugees. But she understood the bigger picture. If Rykar fell into these people's hands, it could be catastrophic for both the Jolasi Empire and the Human Alliance. The knowledge of how his body integrated human blood was too dangerous. Some unscrupulous faction could create monstrous super soldiers or trigger a new arms race that would dwarf the current conflict. She bit her lip, hating the choice, but there seemed no alternative. "We need a plan," she said. "We can't just run blindly," Rykar agreed. "If we board a small craft, they'll track us down unless we create a diversion. Your station commander, would she help?" Linnea's gaze flicked to the overhead vents, thinking of the labyrinthine design of the station. "Hollins is no ally of yours," she warned, "but she might see the wisdom in preventing these people from seizing the data. Let's try." They navigated to the control tower, where they found Commander Hollins barking orders to a skeleton crew trying to hold the station's defenses. She looked furious as Linnea explained the infiltration of the lab, the partial theft of genetic data, and the threat to the entire sector if these attackers escaped with that knowledge. Hollins eyed Rykar as though he were an especially dangerous beast. Then she swore under her breath. "Fine. I'll authorize your escape under one condition. You wipe out the last incursion in our main docking corridor, so I can safely evacuate the refugees. If your precious Jolasi friend is so unstoppable, let him prove it by clearing a path. Rykar met the challenge with snarl. I don't serve humans, but if it ensures that these people don't become test subjects for your enemy, I'll do it. A small, desperate plan formed. Hollins would order a partial self-destruction sequence on the station's external docking clamps, giving the impression of catastrophic damage. While the attackers scrambled to secure their own ships, Linnea and Rykar would slip away on a short-range shuttle through a less monitored airlock. At the same time, any refugees who could still move would be rushed aboard the station's largest transport vessel, hoping to escape in the chaos. It all hinged on clearing the docking corridor of hostiles. The corridor was a nightmare of scattered cargo, broken lights, and drifting smoke. The attackers had set up makeshift barricades near a bulkhead, pinning down the station's security team. Bodies of fallen guards littered the floor. Linnea's stomach churned at the sight. She willed herself to remain composed. People needed her. She found a vantage point behind an overturned cargo sled, exchanging a few disruptor blasts with the entrenched enemy. Rykar circled around with surprisingly silent footsteps for someone his size. Linnea spotted him crouched behind a column, gauging distances. When a stray shot struck the pillar next to him, he dashed out, moving faster than a normal Jolasi, as if some new reservoir of energy fueled him. Linnea fired several covering shots. It was enough distraction for Rykar to launch himself at the barricade. She heard shouts of alarm, then the sounds of heavy blows. By the time Linnea advanced, one of the attackers was already down, moaning. Another pointed a rifle at Rykar's back, but Linnea seized a broken steel rod from the floor and slammed it against the man's arm, forcing the barrel away. The shot went wild, scorching the ceiling. Rykar spun and delivered a finishing blow. Two more lay unconscious. The corridor was clear. At that moment, the station's alarm system rang out its catastrophic warning. Hollins had triggered the partial self-destruct. The floor vibrated with a series of controlled detonations. The overhead lights flickered, and the interior blast doors began sealing. Linnea hurried past the disabled barricade and found the small side hatch leading to a cramped maintenance airlock. Rykar rushed to her side, chest heaving. We'll have to be fast. The blast doors will seal us in if we don't get through. Linnea input the override code Hollins had provided. The door slid open, revealing a narrow passage that led to a half-functional cargo shuttle. The vessel was battered, barely flight-worthy by the look of it, but it would have to do. She and Rykar ducked inside. With some quick rewiring, she got the engines online. The control panel flickered sporadically, damaged in prior skirmishes, but enough sensors lit up to show they had minimal navigation thrusters and a single FTL spool that might jump them a few light years, if the spool even worked. Kareen, who had insisted on coming, slipped in right after them, carrying a sack of medical supplies and data backups. Another small group of refugees tried to follow, but there were too many. Linnea's heart sank. She had a trust that Hollins's plan would save most of them. Strap in, Linnea ordered, her voice trembling slightly with adrenaline. She closed the hatch and sealed the internal locks. Through the forward viewport, she could see the station's docking clamps explosively decouple from the nearest external ring. Multiple enemy ships were in disarray, some pulling back, uncertain if the station was about to fully explode. It was the perfect cover for them to slip out. Rykar took the co-pilot's seat by her side, his large form cramped. Kareen tried to calm himself by chanting a sorry prayer for safe passage. Linnea tapped the ignition. The shuttle's engines sputtered, then roared to life. She aimed the craft toward the emergency egress tunnel, which had begun to open, though damaged. Maneuvering with a delicate hand, she guided them into the vacuum of space. Station Kalindra shrank behind them, battered by the final ring of blasts. Linnea swallowed a lump in her throat. She felt a pang of guilt for leaving the place in such a state, but they had done what they could. The ship's sensor suite chirped, indicating multiple vessels in the region. Some were definitely enemies, A few might have been allies or neutral parties. She plotted a short FTL jump toward an uninhabited sector known as the Shattered Crescent, a region of asteroids and cosmic dust that blocks standard scanners. It wasn't the safest area to hide, but it would mask them from pursuit if they were lucky. She engaged the spool. A swirling vortex of colors enveloped the shuttle, accompanied by a lurch that made her stomach flip. Everything vibrated violently, as if the ship might tear itself apart. Then, just as suddenly it was over, they emerged into the starlit emptiness of the Shattered Crescent. Large asteroid fragments floated everywhere like silent sentinels. Linnea exhaled in relief. Rykar's expression, however, remained grim. He cradled his left arm. The scales were chipped, and more of that dark, oddly tinted blood oozed out. Kareen, apparently mustering courage, approached. "Let me see." "It's nothing," Rykar snapped, though his voice was weaker than before. Linnea keyed the autopilot to hold position behind an asteroid, then hurried to kneel beside him. "That was a nasty burn from the corridor fight. Sit still. Kareen, hand me the med kit." His gaze flickered to her, and for a moment, Linnea expected him to refuse. But he relented, perhaps drained by the recent battles. She carefully cleaned the wound, applying a coagulant that was safe for Jolasi physiology, at least according to her previous knowledge. Now, she wasn't so certain. His biology was part Jolasi, part something else. The transfusion had caused changes. She had no time or equipment to run thorough tests in the shuttle, but her eyes confirmed what she suspected. His blood was partly human now, or close to it. The deeper implication unsettled her, but it also confirmed that the rumors and results from the station's lab were not exaggerations. When she finished treating his arm, Rykar spoke quietly, almost grudgingly. "Thank you, Dr. Shaw." Linnea gave him a small nod. It was the first time he had addressed her by name. The moment felt oddly intimate, overshadowed by the swirling chaos they had just fled. "We're not out of danger yet," she murmured. "If those attackers find us, they might corner us out here." Kareen, perched near the sensor console, used his nimble sorry fingers to adjust the readouts. "I see no sign of pursuit so far. I suspect they have their hands full at Calendar Station." Linnea sank into the pilot's seat. Her mind reeled with all that had happened. The sabotage, the infiltration, the data theft, the improbable synergy of human and Jolasi blood in Rykar's veins. She feared that if unscrupulous groups had even partial data, the entire galaxy might be at risk. This kind of knowledge, of a bridging genotype, could rewrite the balance of power. Nations would clamor to replicate or weaponize such a transformation. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, mostly to herself. Rykar stared out at the drifting asteroids. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then he answered in a low voice. "I won't return to the Empire. If they find out what happened to me, how I'm changed, they'll isolate me in a lab or execute me for defilement. And your alliance, would it treat me any better?" Linnea closed her eyes briefly. "I'm not so sure. Some in the alliance might see you as a threat. Others would see you as a test subject. If these unknown forces infiltrated a neutral station, they might have agents in both governments. We can't trust anyone entirely." He exhaled in that half-hiss. "Then we have no home to go to." Kareen raised one of his left arms. "We can go deeper into the Shattered Crescent. There's a rumor among the Tsari about a hidden research station there, from an ancient civilization or from exiles who left the major powers behind. Perhaps they would harbor us." Linnea was skeptical. "And risk leading these people to it? We might endanger them if we go. But maybe they have the technology to hide us or cloak us properly." After some debate, they decided to chart a course for deeper regions of the Shattered Crescent. The shuttle's hull rattled at times, battered by small debris. Linnea worried they might run out of supplies in a matter of days. She drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, haunted by images of the station's corridors strewn with wounded. She also dreamed of Delgado, the young soldier whose blood had made all this possible. She wondered if his final gift would become a beacon of hope or a catalyst for more violence. A day later, with oxygen supplies running critically low, The sensors detected a faint energy signature that did not match typical Alliance or Jolasi designs. It took them several hours of careful navigation to pinpoint the source. Hiding in the lee of a massive asteroid cluster was a small facility, spherical in design, radiating sporadic signals. It had a docking port just large enough for their shuttle. Unsure whether it was inhabited or automated, they approached slowly. The docking bay doors opened of their own accord, as though expecting them. Inside, the station was lit by a dim glow. Linnea guided the craft to a gentle touchdown. The three travelers, Linnea, Rykar, and Kareen, exchanged tense looks before disembarking. They found themselves in a large, empty hangar. The architecture felt alien yet pristine, with walls made from a smooth, ivory-like alloy. A soft voice echoed from overhead speakers in a language they didn't recognize. Then it shifted seamlessly into standard. "Welcome, visitors. We have been waiting." Linnea's skin prickled. She glanced at Rykar, who seemed equally on edge, though his stance was that of a warrior ready for anything. They followed subtle markings on the floor that led them through curving corridors. Doors hissed open as they approached, revealing a circular chamber with a high ceiling. In its center stood a slender figure, draped in a robe of shimmering material. The being's face was serene, with elongated features that recalled the precursors from half-legendary lore. Linnea's heart thudded. Could be true? "You carry within you a new form," the figure said, addressing Rykar. Its voice was melodic. "Your transformation is no accident. It is part of an ancient plan initiated long before your empires existed." Kareen nearly dropped the medical sack in shock. Linnea stepped forward, mouth dry. "Who are you?" "We are custodians of knowledge left by the civilizations that shaped your galaxy," the figure answered gently. "Your presence here signals the awakening of that knowledge." Rykar bristled. "What do you want with me?" A faint smile touched the being's features. "Nothing more than to guide you, if you wish. You fear exploitation by your own kind. Yet your newly blended genetics could be a bridge between species that have long warred. The question is what path you will choose." Linnea exchanged a glance with Rykar, her mind spinning with questions. The events of the past days had turned her worldview upside down. First saving the life of an alien warrior with human blood, then fleeing conspirators who wanted that genetic secret, and now discovering this hidden station with inhabitants who spoke of ancient bridging. She wondered what Delgado would think if he knew that his blood had set this chain of events in motion. Rykar growled softly, a sound of uncertainty. "I'm Jolasi, but not entirely. I don't even know who I am anymore." The robed figure inclined its head. "You are who you have always been, just with broader horizons now. In time, you may find that your transformation is not a curse, but a gift to both your species and to others across the stars." Linnea stepped closer, forcing herself to trust. "We need help. If we're being hunted, we can't hide forever. And we can't risk the knowledge about his condition being misused. Is there anything you can do?" The robed being beckoned them deeper into the station. Beyond a corridor of luminous panels, they arrived at a laboratory full of advanced technology that Linnea could barely comprehend. The being explained that the station was equipped to shield them from external scans, mend damaged genetic structures, and even accelerate beneficial hybrid traits. Kareen nearly fainted from excitement, scanning the instrumentation with all four arms. He spoke softly of the Tsari myths that predicted a place like this, an ark of knowledge. Rykar was less enthused. "I've had enough of experiments." "Here, you will not be an experiment," the being assured him. "You will be a collaborator. We can teach you how to control the new potentials in your blood, how to harness them rather than fear them. And your human companion, her compassion is the reason you stand here at all." Linnea let out a long breath. She wanted to collapse from sheer relief that this might be a safe haven. But part of her worried about how she could remain hidden while the galaxy faced possible meltdown if certain groups got their hands on partial data. "We can't just vanish," she said softly. "We both come from worlds that could be torn apart by a new arms race. Is there nothing we can do to stop it?" The figure placed a delicate hand on her shoulder. The material of its robe glimmered with shifting color, as though reflecting the swirling cosmos. Stopping it will require more than the two of you. But your presence here could be the first step in forging alliances beyond old rivalries. In time, perhaps you will reveal yourselves to your people with a new message of unity. But only once you are ready, and once you know who truly stands with you and who stand against you. Rykar's scale brow furrowed. So we hide and train while our galaxy spins on in chaos. Not hide, the being corrected. Learn, prepare. The seeds of harmony are often sown in the darkest hours. In the silent transformations of individuals, entire worlds can be changed. Linnea exchanged a look with Rykar, memories flickering of the corridor battles, the sabotage, the hateful stares. But she also recalled how he had saved her from the gunman's grasp, how he had risked his life to clear a path for refugees. In her own realm, she had defied military orders to preserve the life of someone once considered an enemy. Perhaps that was the kind of example both species needed, however small it seemed in the vast swirl of cosmic events. She touched Rykar's arm carefully. Maybe this is the best path for now. We're both outcasts in a way. You can't go home. I can't face what the Alliance might do if they learn everything. And Kareen, you're free to leave if you want, though you're probably on their target list too. Tsari made a waving gesture with his hands. I'll remain. After all, this technology, we may uncover wonders that surpass even Tsari's knowledge. Rykar exhaled, tension crackling in his posture. Then he turned to the robed figure. I agree to stay for a time, but if I sense deceit, I'll take my chances elsewhere. Understood, the being said calmly. It took a step back, and a soft hum of energy enveloped the lab. Panels lit up with streams of data that reminded Linnea of the readings she'd seen in the station's medical scanners, only far more advanced. A sense of promise lingered in the air, as though their arrival was part of a design too grand to fully fathom. Thus began their quiet existence on the hidden station within the Shattered Crescent. Days blended into a new routine of healing, study, and sporadic attempts to contact the outside world with encrypted messages. They learned that the host of the station, who referred to itself simply as a custodian, was not alone. Others of its kind existed in remote pockets throughout the galaxy, safeguarding ancient knowledge from the time of the precursors. They had no interest in meddling directly in political affairs, only in guiding those who might realize the next evolutionary step toward unity. For Rykar, each day was a revelation of his changing physiology. He discovered he could anticipate an opponent's movement a fraction of a second before it happened. He could sense Linnea's emotional state from across a corridor, feeling her subtle anxieties or small hopes. These powers unnerved him as much as they intrigued him. He sometimes missed the simplicity of being a soldier, of following orders. Yet the new dimension opening within him challenged everything he knew about what it meant to be Jolasi, or to be himself. Linnea, meanwhile, worked alongside Kareen in the station's labs, analyzing samples of Rykar's transformed cells. She wanted to ensure there were no dangerous side effects. Her guilt over leaving the refugees behind gnawed at her. She spent hours each night tinkering with the station's communication array, hoping to glean updates on Kalendra Station or confirm if Commander Hollins had managed to evacuate. News was scarce, filtered through the custodian's sophisticated firewalls to prevent detection. She gleaned only fragments. The station had partially survived the assault, the attackers retreated, but pockets of conflict still flared throughout the Orvan system. Some rumored that an unnamed faction was paying high bounties for information about a Jolasi hybrid. The net tightened. Eventually, Linnea realized their absence was stirring rumors among both the Alliance and the Jolasi Empire. Some believed she'd been abducted, others believed she defected. Rykar had likely been declared a traitor by the more conservative elements of the Jolasi military. Yet she found an odd sense of purpose here, working with advanced technologies, unraveling the mysteries of ancient cross-species genetics, forging a cautious bond with the very being she once might have viewed as an enemy. These changes mirrored the transformations in Rykar's body. She felt changed, too. Weeks later, as she and Rykar were alone in the station's garden sphere, an area where carefully engineered plants thrived under artificial sunlight. He quietly said, "I was wrong about you, about your kind. I spent years believing humans were all liars, cowards, or warmongers. Yet you risked your own life to save me. Your own people be damned." Linnea tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, remembering Delgado's pale face in the medical ward the moment she decided to use his blood. "I did what any doctor would do, or should do. You owe me no apology." He met her gaze, his alien eyes luminous. "Still, I am grateful." She offered a small, genuine smile. "So am I. Our species have been at odds so long, but we've barely tried to see the similarities. It took a crisis to reveal them." His expression turned troubled. "We can't hide here forever. I fear a larger war is brewing, fueled by those who might exploit what happened inside me. And I can't turn my back on my empire or your people if they're dragged into a bioweapons arms race. Perhaps we must do something more." She nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. The custodians say we can leave when we're ready, but we need a plan. Maybe we can approach a smaller neutral faction, gather allies, then appeal to moderate voices in both governments. The knowledge stored here should be shared carefully, responsibly. Not all humans or Jolasi are corrupt." A mild breeze stirred the leaves in the garden sphere, generated by the station's environmental controls. He reached for her hand, gingerly. She let him. His scales, once cold and coarse, now felt warmer and smoother, almost halfway to human texture. "Then let's prepare," he murmured. "Together." Her heart thumped at the word together. She thought of Delgado again, of that blood transfusion that had linked humanity and Jolasi biology in one impossible union. It struck her that Delgado's memory, far from dividing them, had become a symbol of potential reconciliation. Each passing day, they trained and studied. The custodian imparted glimpses of the ancient civilization that had seeded life across multiple star systems. It revealed that certain individuals, genetically predisposed to bridging species, would emerge over millennia. Most had perished without discovering their true nature. Rykar's was the first successful case documented in a very long time, at least in this region of the galaxy. Linnea felt awed and frightened by this cosmic scale of design, if design was indeed the right word. Could chance have played a role? The custodian insisted it was both chance and destiny, woven together in ways mortal minds could scarcely grasp. Months seemed to pass like days. Linnea honed her medical expertise with tools she'd never even imagined, while Rykar sharpened his mental acuity, learning to master the empathic sensitivity that occasionally overwhelmed him. Corrine compiled a massive database of instructions for future Sari scientists, enthralled by the potential for peaceful cross-species collaborations. Finally, the day came when they could no longer remain in isolation. With the custodian's help, they outfitted the battered shuttle with advanced stealth technology. Linnea decided to slip back into Alliance territory undetected, to reach out to a high-ranking official she trusted, Admiral Lassiter, known for his integrity and reluctance to further the war. Simultaneously, Rykar planned to contact a Jolasi official who had once been his mentor, rumored to be disillusioned with the Empire's aggressive policies. If these moderate voices could learn the truth, perhaps the seeds of cooperation could be planted before the unscrupulous factions escalated the arms race. The custodian watched them load supplies into the shuttle, its robed figure standing at the edge of the docking bay. "Your fates are intertwined," it told them. "Where you go, the potential for unity follows. Remember that. You cannot succeed by arms alone, but by forging connections that outlast fear." Linnea placed a gentle hand on Rykar's arm. He nodded to her, then turned to the custodian. "We will return, if circumstances allow it. The Empire and the Alliance are on a collision course with something unimaginable. We'll do what we can to steer them away." The custodian bowed. "Farewell, travelers." As the shuttle's hatch sealed, Linnea took the pilot's seat once more. Corrine settled behind the navigation console, double-checking the stealth generator. Rykar strapped in next to her, his presence steady and reassuring. She powered the engines, and with a final wave to the serene figure in the bay, they lifted off, exiting the station. Outside, the shattered crescent's asteroids glimmered with starlight. Linnea guided them toward a corridor that would allow a safe FTL jump. Before engaging the spool, she glanced at Rykar. His eyes met hers in silent understanding. Their journey, the improbable alliance between a human doctor and a Jolasi warrior, had already shattered barriers she once thought insurmountable. The entire galaxy might soon learn about the possibilities unleashed by a single unorthodox blood transfusion. Though danger still lurked in the shadows, though powerful forces might conspire to seize or destroy them, they had hope. They had each other, and that, she realized, was reward beyond imagination. She activated the jump. Starlight elongated into ribbons of color around them. In that moment, she thought of Delgado once more and silently thanked him for the part he had played in forging this new path. The shuttle surged forward, leaving the hidden station behind, ready to face a cosmos teetering on the brink of profound change. I remember precisely the moment my team first laid eyes on Earth, that bright blue sphere spinning against the star-flecked darkness of space. For the entire journey, I had read countless briefs and intelligence reports on humans, but all of them diverged on one specific point. The species was either violently chaotic or remarkably resourceful. None of the available data seemed to agree on exactly how dangerous they might be. Our mission was, in the words of the Galactic Council, a standard pre-contact threat assessment. We'd done similar evaluations on 3 other developing worlds in the last 2 cycles, but somehow, from the first hour of Earth observation, I sensed this place would be different. My name is Commander Andrax, assigned to the Council's Advanced Observer Corps. My responsibility is leading a small team of specialized officers, behavioral analysts, weaponry experts, communication specialists, to gather accurate data on newly discovered species. The results of our report to the Council can determine whether that species is offered cooperative membership or subjected to stringent containment protocols. The Council has learned, through millennia of trial and often grievous error, that appearances are deceiving. A floating bubble might dissolve your hull, or a fearsome predator might practice pacifism to the brink of self-sacrifice. We arrived in Earth orbit undetected, thanks to our cloaking field, a technology we believed was centuries beyond the capability of any pre-interstellar civilization. The Council had dispatched our decoy satellite as a distraction, ensuring that human governments would fixate on this mysterious object near their planet, while our real observation unit slipped to the surface unnoticed. By the time we established ourselves in a concealed maintenance room adjacent to a major diplomatic venue, everything appeared to be going exactly as we planned. The first sign that our usual assumptions might fail came scarcely half a day into the operation. We were parked inside a building that overlooked a large reception hall where officials from various Earth nations had gathered. From our vantage point, we had a clear line of sight through tinted glass. We could see everything happening at the reception, the delegates arriving in sleek vehicles, the security teams patrolling the perimeter, the wait staff arranging trays of food. Our job was straightforward: identify the potential threats. Threats, in this context, usually meant influential political leaders, generals, or heads of advanced military projects. In simpler terms, it meant those who possessed the power and intention to wreak havoc once interstellar contact became public. At first, the guests who drew our attention were exactly those we expected: a tall, broad-chested man with a voice that boomed across the hall whenever he laughed or demanded attention, or the stern-faced security chief scanning for any sign of trouble. Those individuals exuded classic markers we'd been trained to spot: confidence, apparent authority, readiness for conflict. Ambassador Roy Harrington, for instance, spent half the reception delivering monologues about his involvement in major treaties, occasionally punctuating his stories with threats about dire consequences for any nation that wouldn't cooperate. He was exactly the kind of alpha personality we had learned to distrust. Meanwhile, Security Chief Violet Tran maintained a visible, methodical vigilance, her posture rigid, her eyes continually sweeping each corner of the room. She drank nothing and accepted no food, as though her entire being was laser-focused on preventing threats. It was nearly comical how closely these two fit our typical categories. Yet there was another figure, unremarkable in height, dressed in nondescript formal attire, drifting from conversation to conversation with such subtlety that we initially overlooked her entirely. I wouldn't have thought to notice her at all if not for a single detail. Our scanning device caught a distortion whenever she stepped too close to the refreshment table. It was a mild fluctuation in the electromagnetic field, something so slight that it might have been a hardware glitch. But Commander Andrax had learned never to dismiss anomalies outright. So we trained our ocular enhancements on her. She looked like an academic or possibly a junior researcher, someone overshadowed by the boisterous politicians and the obvious security staff. Her hair was pinned back neatly, her expression pleasant but bland. A subtle device, almost like a small earpiece, was concealed behind her left ear. She never lingered in any conversation more than a minute or two. Yet the instant she moved on, her previous conversation partner seemed slightly flustered, as if they'd just confessed more than they intended. When she reached the far side of the room, a second fluctuation registered on our scanners, and for the second time, we had to question the reliability of our cloaking technology. My second-in-command, Czar, was the first to identify her from the data feed we skimmed off local networks. Dr. Eliana Brooks, a biotechnologist affiliated with a defense research agency. Nothing outwardly jumped out in her official credentials. She had multiple advanced degrees, biology, engineering, and possibly some specialized coursework in cryptography, but the public record was thin. Usually, such wide-ranging expertise would be a sign of unusual brilliance. Humans, we'd learned, typically specialize deeply in one field, rarely mastering several at once. Curious, we decided to cross-reference her background. Within moments, Trill, our behavioral analyst, discovered an entire list of achievements that weren't widely publicized. Top of her academic class at a prestigious institution, trained in wilderness survival, certified in advanced first aid, knowledge of half a dozen languages, including some that were seldom taught beyond elite circles. Dr. Eliana Brooks didn't just dabble in these areas, she excelled in them. Moreover, we suspected she had personal ties to an ultra-secretive research division. If this was true, it meant that her presence at that diplomatic function wasn't simply as a random scientist wandering around. She might very well be present for the same reason we were, to gather intelligence. Yet she was doing it in a way that didn't set off alarms. Ambassador Harrington's showboating and security chief Tran's obvious vigilance both screamed potential threat, so that's where everyone's attention naturally gravitated. But Dr. Brooks did the opposite, subdued, calm, almost invisible. It prompted me to recall a note from the Council's briefing. Among certain species, the deadliest individual is often not the loudest. The line was typically used in reference to alien species who evolve camouflage, but it felt oddly relevant to this Earth scenario. I began to suspect that, in this particular room full of Earth's elites, she might pose the greatest threat, and we were not the only ones drawing that conclusion. Moments later, Dr. Brooks glanced up. The angle of her gaze was precise. It landed exactly where our hidden vantage point was located. That made no sense. Our cloaking field was advanced enough to conceal us from standard optical or infrared detection. Yet the expression on her face was akin to mild curiosity, as though she sensed something just outside her field of vision. In the same second, our instruments recorded a second electromagnetic spike. She placed a small device, almost like a pen, on the edge of the refreshment table. Instantly, I heard Kra, our weapons specialist, exhale sharply as he peered at the readouts. Whatever that device was, it was scanning on a frequency that nearly matched our cloaking field's baseline. It shouldn't be possible for humans to know that frequency, let alone have a device that could scan it. I recalled distinctly the knot of anxiety in my thoracic core as I realized we might be compromised. The rational course of action was to pack up and initiate an immediate relocation, as the council protocols demanded. But the human named Eliana Brooks shot one more glance at our direction, set her glass on the table, and proceeded to walk toward a side exit. She was alone, unhurried, radiating no threat signals. It was as though she was offering a choice: follow her or remain caged in our vantage point where we risked exposure. For a moment, I wrestled with procedure, with fear of the unknown. Ultimately, we opted for retreat. We began packing up, carefully dismantling the scanning arrays, stuffing them into portable crates, so we could slip away through the building's maintenance corridors. Before we reached the nearest corridor, we received the first direct communication from Dr. Brooks. Our secure comm channel crackled with static. Then a calm, human voice spoke in a language of the council with near-perfect intonation. To the unidentified observers, your stealth technology is impressive, but not as flawless as you believe. You should avoid the East Corridor. There's a maintenance crew approaching. Our entire team froze. No human should be able to speak our language. Yet here she was, not only speaking it, but giving us practical advice. The corridor logs did indeed show a real maintenance crew approaching from the east side. How she knew this was beyond us. Crow was outraged. He wanted to jam communications and break for the extraction point. But that route was suddenly compromised, too. Zolter's drone feed showed a gathering crowd of guests outside the building's main exit for some kind of publicity event. If we tried to slip into that throng, there was a high chance our cloaking field would fail under so many direct eyes. Humans might not see us precisely, but any unusual flicker or glitch would draw attention, and we couldn't risk that. The voice returned, still calm, still polite. If you intend to leave the premises undetected, you should proceed to the north exit. I'm going that way. Feel free to join me. Against our standard protocols, we ended up taking that suggestion. We hurried to the north side. Sure enough, it was nearly deserted, just the occasional staff member on cigarette breaks. No one gave us a second glance as we carefully moved with our disguised gait. The building's outer door creaked open, and there was Dr. Brooks leaning against a sleek black vehicle. A single individual stood near the driver's seat, not quite looking in our direction. She seemed completely at ease, as though she had all the time in the world. Once more, that same voice came through the comm channel. We can speak freely inside. Or you can attempt to park on 5th Street for extraction, but there's a festival about to begin there. Children, fireworks, local law enforcement. Likely not the kind of crowd you want if you're trying to leave quietly. I gave the order for my team to remain disguised and approach. This defied half the rulebook, but the alternative was forcing a messy escape that would compromise our presence further. When we got close enough, Dr. Brooks opened the rear door of the vehicle and stepped aside. If it was a trap, it was skillfully staged, but something in her posture indicated she was sincere. She showed no signs of aggression, no visible weapon, no threatening stance. My team piled into the car, each of us silently preparing for confrontation. Inside, we found the interior larger than expected, with plush seating arranged so that 4 or 5 people could face one another. The driver was a man with a calm demeanor who nodded in silent greeting, started the engine, and pulled into the street. The door sealed. Dr. Brooks tapped a small console, and I felt a faint pressure change. She was activating some form of advanced privacy technology. She did all of this with an ease that suggested she'd done it many times before. Then she turned to face us, still seeing us as humans, at least from her vantage point. We had not dropped our disguises. "Let's keep introductions simple," she said. "My name is Dr. Eliana Brooks. I'm aware that you're not what you appear to be. I'm also aware that your technology is centuries ahead of ours, at least in most respects. But you should know that we humans have been preparing for potential contact for quite a while. More thoroughly than most of my species realize, in fact." Her effortless use of the council language was disconcerting. I tried to maintain composure. "How did you learn to speak our tongue? Humanity hasn't had official contact with any galactic civilization." Her lips curved upward in a small smile. "Official contact, no. Unofficial contact, yes. We've retrieved enough partial databases to piece together linguistic patterns, especially for trade languages. Council Standard was surprisingly easy once we recognized its morphological rules. Trill, who had studied xenolinguistics extensively, was clearly intrigued. She couldn't hold back. Which partial databases? Nothing in Council records indicates any formal interactions with Earth. We do have records of a few scout vessels from non-Council species, but those are highly classified. Don't worry, Dar, Brooks said, waving away the question. I'll explain everything. For the moment, let's just say you're not the first visitors to this planet. We've encountered glimpses of your galactic community. Some visitors arrive by design, some by accident, and some probably never intended to make themselves known. We were all silent, struggling to reconcile this with our prior assumptions. Humans were meant to be a pre-FTL species, with minimal grasp of advanced physics, let alone the intricacies of galactic politics. The idea that they had somehow acquired partial databases from these random encounters seemed impossible. Kra cleared his throat. You claim to have encountered other aliens, but your species hasn't displayed any sign of interstellar travel. You don't colonize other worlds, and your scanning technology is still primitive by standard measures. Dr. Brooks accepted the remark without offense. We're still learning. Our progress in certain areas might be behind yours, but in others, we've made leaps that might surprise you. The vehicle eased onto a wide avenue lined with artificial lights. The cityscape around us was an odd mix of archaic Earth design. Massive glass buildings, networks of vehicles reliant on combustion engines, and sporadic pockets of advanced electronics. Dr. Brooks motioned out the window. You see only the surface level. Humanity doesn't share all its achievements publicly. Some governments are paranoid about releasing technologies that might give rival nations an advantage, so the real breakthroughs stay in black projects. Like your device that's scanning our cloaking field? I challenged. She inclined her head. Precisely. I designed that particular device as a means of detecting exotic energy. Signatures. The moment we noticed your decoy satellite in orbit, some of us suspected it was a diversion, so we began scanning for anything unusual at ground level. Zolter, who prided himself on his stealth expertise, glanced at me in alarm. Everything about this conversation defied the standard progression of first contact. We were the ones supposed to be collecting all the data from unsuspecting natives. Instead, here we were, riding in a human vehicle while the occupant calmly listed off reasons why our infiltration had failed. The car descended into an underground parking facility, spiraling downward until the noise of the city vanished. When we finally rolled to a stop, Dr. Brooks spoke softly to the driver. Thank you, Theo. I'll handle it from here. Theo, as she called him, gave a nod. That was the extent of his involvement. He hadn't spoken once throughout the entire journey. When we stepped out, I expected a standard subterranean garage, but we emerged into a circular chamber with smooth, polished walls. A single door lay at one side, leading deeper into the structure. This is our secure lab, she explained, striding forward at a measured pace. We've nicknamed it the Echo Chamber. It's shielded from outside surveillance by multiple layers of interference, both physical and electromagnetic. You won't have to worry about eavesdropping from your orbital craft or from any other human agencies, for that matter. Kra tested the walls with a discreet wave of his scanning device, which still worked behind our illusions. He shook his head in disbelief, evidently confounded by the readings. Trill's mouth was slightly open, as though she wanted to ask more, but wasn't sure where to start. As for me, I realized that we had stumbled into a scenario far removed from the usual script. Our protocols mandated minimal contact, but those protocols never accounted for the possibility that the natives were prepared at our level or close to it. Inside the next room, we found a conference-like space. There were chairs arranged around a central table covered in a variety of items that ranged from Earth-based snacks to sealed containers labeled with odd chemical symbols. Dr. Brooks must have seen me eyeing them. I don't know your exact biochemistry, but I made an educated guess that your species might metabolize certain chemical compounds differently. These are some potential nutrient solutions that I hoped might be compatible. If they're not, I'd be happy to synthesize something else. The matter-of-fact tone suggested she did this sort of thing regularly. My team exchanged glances. We had a tense, silent debate via our short-range neurocom. The question, do we maintain illusions or reveal ourselves? The illusions cost significant energy, and Dr. Brooks clearly wasn't fooled by them. With a slow, deliberate gesture, I order my team to deactivate their disguises. One by one, the shimmering field around each of us dissolved, revealing our true forms. Slender bipeds with elongated limbs, ridged exoskeleton plates, and a series of specialized sensory nodules arrayed around our heads. All told, we must have appeared grotesque by human standards. Dr. Brooks didn't so much as blink. She walked around the table, studying our physical appearance. Fascinating, she said quietly. Your morphology suggests partial adaptation to high-pressure environments, possibly aquatic or semi-aquatic ancestry. Trill's eyes widened. She rarely met a non-council scientist who recognized these subtleties. Dr. Brooks continued, if I had to guess, your species transitions from water-based juveniles to land-based adults, retaining partial gill structures inside the thoracic cavity that serve as auxiliary respiration. Correct. Trill managed to nod. That is extremely accurate. We keep that detail from many official channels. It's not something widely known. It's not widely known to humans either, Dr. Brooks said. I just observe, analyze, and hypothesize. That's my job. I gestured for my team to remain calm. You're quite direct, Doctor. Perhaps you can explain how you acquired so much knowledge about advanced civilizations. We were under the impression that official contact had not yet been made. My words were sharper than I intended, but I wanted answers. She settled into one of the chairs and folded her hands. It hasn't, in the sense of a large-scale, public event. But Earth has had, shall we say, unofficial contacts dating back decades, possibly longer. A handful of small scout ships from various species either crashed, landed covertly, or were detected on arrival. Some of those visitors left behind scraps of technology or partial data systems. None of it was enough to catapult humanity into a galactic power, but it gave us glimpses. We learned we're not alone. We learned that other species travel between stars. We learned that some come here just to watch, while others might have more predatory motives. She rose and moved to a console, tapping a sequence. A holographic projection flared to life, displaying grainy photos of a wrecked spacecraft in an icy wasteland. This was recovered in Antarctica about 50 Earth years ago. The pilot died within weeks, but not before teaching a small human research team a rudimentary level of its language. They recorded about 600 words. Over the decades, a few cryptography experts started connecting those words to references in other partial databases. They realized there were repeating morphological patterns, presumably from a broader trade language. It wasn't until we retrieved a salvage device from another crashed vessel, a Carabaxian scout ship, that we confirmed the existence of your Galactic Council. Zolter let out a low hiss, a sign of shock in our species. Carabaxians typically roamed the outer edges of Council space, known for their skill in stealth scouting. It was humiliating to learn that humans, a supposedly pre-contact civilization, had gleaned so many secrets from them. Dr. Brooks advanced the holographic projection, revealing a list of data points referencing conflict in distant star systems. More recently, she continued, we developed detection arrays specifically tuned to certain exotic signatures. That's how we spotted your decoy satellite. Naturally, we assumed it was part of a larger plan, so we scoured the surface for any anomalies. That led us to you. Kraw's mandibles flexed in frustration. So you uncovered us because of that scanning device you placed near the refreshment table. She nodded. That was just a portable version. This facility houses the larger, more sophisticated arrays. Once I realized you might be observing the diplomatic event, I decided to attend. The rest was fairly straightforward. Trill's appendages twitched anxiously. Are we to assume that you represent your entire species in this matter? Or does your presence here signify a unilateral action by some specialized group? It's a bit of both, Dr. Brooks admitted. I work with a small coalition across multiple governments, a coalition formed decades ago to prepare for the inevitable day when open contact would occur. Officially, we don't exist. Unofficially, we've prevented certain crises, contained certain intelligence leaks, and studied advanced technology quietly. I found myself reevaluating everything I'd learned about humans. The Council's standard approach labeled them as warlike, fractious, prone to violence. Perhaps those labels still held truth, but it was clear they also possessed a core of strategic and analytical minds who watched, gathered data, and prepared. In some ways, that was far more dangerous than any brash general or politician. "And what do you plan to do with us now?" I asked. She shut down the holographic display. "That depends. The Council evidently sends these pre-contact missions to assess whether a species should be quarantined, contained, or offered membership, correct? In other words, you're here to decide if humans are too much of a threat." I hesitated. "Yes. Our role is to make a recommendation." She smiled without showing teeth. "Then I have a proposal. Get the complete data, not just what you saw at that reception, which was staged for a certain kind of threat. Learn everything you need to make a fair assessment. In exchange, share with me, or at least confirm, why your council accelerated its timeline. Our calculations indicated you wouldn't arrive for another few weeks. Something must have prompted an earlier approach." Trill looked to me, obviously curious. The Council never revealed every detail to us, but I possessed enough clearance to know that certain political elements in the Council were worried Earth might be further along technologically than initial scans suggested. There had been debate whether to expedite contact and ensure the humans were brought under the Council's umbrella before they stumbled into alliances with more belligerent species. Perhaps that's exactly what Dr. Brooks was hinting at. Kra, bristling with tension, asked, "What if we choose not to cooperate? We could simply vanish, file our report, and let the Council take the steps it deems necessary." Dr. Brooks rested her elbows on the table. "You could, but the more incomplete your data, the more likely the Council is to impose heavy containment measures. My guess is that would push certain human factions to respond aggressively. Eventually, that path leads to a conflict no one wants. We both lose, so the choice is yours. The only difference is whether your report ends up accurate and fosters a relationship built on trust, or if it stokes fear and triggers confrontation." She made it sound so reasonable. For a moment, I was almost convinced. Then I reminded myself, this woman is no ordinary human. She's precisely the kind of person we were warned about, the quiet one who wields knowledge like a weapon. She was orchestrating a scenario where, no matter what we chose, her faction gained the advantage. Yeah, I couldn't find a flaw in her logic. If the Council perceived humanity as a raw threat, the Council would enforce containment, which would provoke retaliation. Humanity's unpredictability in war might lead to incalculable losses on both sides. I exhaled through the gill like vents along my sides, an involuntary sign of stress. "If we agree to see more, to gather more thorough information, do you guarantee our safety?" She shrugged. "I can't guarantee anything, but it will be counterproductive for me to harm or detain you. Believe me, there are others on Earth who might want to do just that. My colleagues, and I think cooperation is the better path." We decided to accept. Trill and Zar exchanged guarded expressions. Kra looked as though he wanted to protest further, but ultimately, we recognized the necessity. We were at a disadvantage. If Dr. Brooks had discovered us so quickly, we couldn't easily vanish without leaving behind traces of our presence. And if we did that, we'd be fulfilling every negative stereotype about humanity by labeling them as a covert threat. Our mission was about accuracy. This was, ironically, the best shot at achieving it. She offered us a brief tour of the underground facility, sterile corridors, labs filled with advanced Earth-based instruments, some containing alien components evidently integrated over the years. We saw fragments of hull plating from at least 2 known species, one of which belonged to the Carabaxian Stealth Scout design. There were also partial stasis tubes, scraps of advanced circuit boards, and data crystals that nearly made my head spin. If humans had gleaned even a fraction of what was stored inside those crystals, Their baseline technology might be dangerously close to matching the Council's lesser tiers. At one point, Brooks led us to a heavily reinforced room lined with thick plates of metal. "We keep some of the more volatile experiments here," she explained. She tapped a control panel, revealing an internal chamber that contained some kind of alien reactor core, dormant, salvaged from a crashed vessel in the mountains. We never managed to power it fully. If we had, we might be building ships of our own. But this was enough to teach us the basics of exotic energy fields, which eventually led to the device that detected your cloaking signature. Trill was speechless. I felt cold dread creeping in. If these were the results of a few random crashes, imagine what humans could do with deliberate trade. Or, worse, with stolen technology after an armed confrontation. The Council needed to know that Earth was no naive backwater. Their approach to Earth, arriving in a flashy demonstration of advanced technology, could backfire if they underestimated how quickly humans might adapt or replicate what they observed. After the informal tour, we returned to the conference space, now more aware of how carefully orchestrated this entire facility was. Every corridor, every lab, every piece of evidence was arranged to convey one overarching message. Humans are neither as primitive nor as unprepared as you think. Eliana Brooks, having guided us through the labyrinth, finally paused. She regarded us with what almost seemed like empathy. "I know this is a lot to process. We've spent decades collecting these pieces of the puzzle, always aware that someday your council or someone like them would show up. Now the moment has arrived, sooner than even we anticipated." Zolter, who had stayed quiet through most of the tour, spoke up. "And you claim that the rest of your species is largely unaware of all this? How is that possible?" Her smile was faint. "Humans are complicated. We have hundreds of countries, thousands of conflicting agendas, and we rarely agree on anything. Only a small percentage of people have direct involvement in top-secret research. For most civilians, the idea of extraterrestrial contact remains hypothetical science fiction. But we have always had those among us who suspect or know the truth. People who discovered crashed debris, coded messages, or other anomalies. Governments bury the evidence to avoid social upheaval. Over the years, a few of us formed networks to share what we learned away from the public eye. Cross-frustration surfaced again. This is precisely the scenario the Council fears. Species that develop behind closed doors, outside the guiding frameworks, eventually lashing out unpredictably. You're basically confirming their worst anxieties." She met his gaze calmly. "Then we'll have to work to allay those anxieties. We want peaceful contact. That's why I was at the diplomatic reception. Certain powerful figures like Ambassador Harrington are the loud decoys. The security chief is a visible shield. Meanwhile, the watchers like me, well, we prefer to keep a low profile until we have enough information to act." It all came back to that guiding principle. The deadliest human in the room was the one no one paid attention to. So far, Brooks's presence embodied that maxim so thoroughly it was unsettling. The biggest question I had was what outcome she hoped for. Was she truly the benevolent messenger, bridging Earth and the Council for mutual benefit? Or did she have a hidden agenda, perhaps to glean even more advanced technology from us? Our discussion was interrupted by an electronic chime. Brooks checked a wrist device. She pressed a button, and a holographic display flickered into view, showing data that must have been relayed from an external sensor array. She scanned it, and her jaw tensed slightly. "Your Council's delegation appears to be accelerating. They'll arrive in low Earth orbit in about 24 hours rather than the original 2 weeks. Our calculations suggest they might attempt a formal landing shortly after that." My entire team reacted with alarm. Even I hadn't expected the timeline to jump that drastically. "Our ship in orbit didn't signal that to us," I said, more sharply than intended. She turned the display so we could see. It showed an approximated course vector for a large vessel inbound toward Earth, matching the signature our briefing had told us to expect from the Council's main diplomatic cruiser. "We've been monitoring the quantum fluctuations they emit. We recognized a shift a few hours ago, indicating an increase in velocity. They must have decided to expedite contact. Zar murmured in disbelief. But how could you possibly interpret quantum-based FTL flux patterns so quickly? She gave a small shrug. We taught ourselves. Remember that partial reactor core in the lab? Enough fragments from other sources, plus the Council's consistent use of certain field frequencies across multiple species, gave us a baseline. It was just a matter of building a wide-spectrum sensor and analyzing the distortions. I suspected they might arrive sooner than planned when you showed up. Perhaps your presence triggered them to move faster. I felt a weight settle in my chest. Our entire operation had relied on the assumption we had time to gather intelligence and file a thorough assessment. With the Council arriving imminently, we no longer had that luxury. Trill was the first to speak. Commander, what do we do now? In truth, I didn't know. Our best chance to salvage this situation was to compile a balanced, accurate report. If we failed to communicate the complexity of human civilization, both their capacity for violence and their capacity for sophisticated adaptation, the Council might do something rash. Meanwhile, if Dr. Brooks was truthful about wanting a peaceful alliance, the next 24 hours could determine whether Earth and the Council collided in misunderstanding or cooperated toward a shared future. Dr. Brooks seemed to sense the tension. She inclined her head. If it would help, you could transmit a preliminary message to your superiors from here. I can route it through a channel that won't blow your cover to every intelligence agency on Earth. Kra's posture stiffened. You want us to trust you with our communications? That's out of the question. I stepped in. We may have little choice. Our direct line to the ship might already be compromised, given how much Dr. Brooks has demonstrated. If the Council arrives in force and finds we haven't submitted any updates, they might interpret our silence as a worst-case scenario. Kra glowered but said nothing. The reality was that we were effectively pinned. Dr. Brooks was offering solutions for a crisis that we partially created by underestimating this world. The mission objective was no longer about hidden observation. It was about damage control. All right, I said, exhaling slowly. I'll file a coded packet of data, but it'll be minimal. We can't share everything until we confirm your true intentions. Give us some time to explore your facility, verify your claims. Then we'll talk about a more detailed briefing. That's fair, Dr. Brooks said, and guided us to a side console. You can input your encryption here. The system is offline from the main Earth networks, so no leaks. Trill and Zar helped me compile a short message in Council code, flagged urgent, summarizing that we had encountered an unusually prepared human contact with extensive knowledge of advanced technology. We recommended the Council approach with caution and open-mindedness, rather than defaulting to containment. I left out the more damning specifics for now. Then we fired it off, trusting that Dr. Brooks's equipment wouldn't sabotage or redirect the package. I had to cling to the possibility that if she wanted to hamper us, she could have done so already. We spent the next several hours verifying pieces of Dr. Brooks's story. She showed us partial translations from those archaic crash survivors, bits of technology reverse-engineered to yield incremental improvements in sensors, communications, and material science. Every question we asked, she answered in meticulous detail, referencing a set of archive files that documented how these breakthroughs were quietly tested, sometimes integrated into Earth's hidden defense systems, or simply stored away for later. It was humbling and terrifying. Each small piece alone wouldn't surpass the Council's level, but combined, they formed a mosaic of knowledge that could catapult humanity forward at a pace that might surpass what the Council had estimated. Periodically, the soft hum of fans or the flicker of overhead lights reminded us we were in a clandestine facility hidden beneath a normal city. According to Dr. Brooks, not even the majority of Earth's military institutions were aware of this place. Her coalition specifically built it to gather and interpret data related to off-world activity, precisely for a day like this. The day had come sooner than they expected, and definitely sooner than we had. The strangest part of the entire experience was how calm Dr. Brooks remained. She never boasted. She never gloated about outwitting us. She was patient with every question, meticulously thorough, yet polite. That mixture of humility and supreme confidence made me wary, because it signaled a quiet, lethal competence. It reminded me of certain apex predators in council space, the ones that blend so seamlessly into their surroundings that you never realize how deadly they are until their teeth are at your throat. I found myself reflecting on all the data the council had given us about humans. Almost all of it detailed wars, nuclear armaments, environmental destruction, and fragmented societies. Very little of it mentioned how quickly they could unify in secret, or how effectively they could glean knowledge from mere scraps. Dr. Brooks was not a lone anomaly. She implied there were others like her at that diplomatic reception. While the diplomats and security chiefs roared for attention, the real intelligence gatherers drifted inconspicuously, collecting morsels of information. My mind reeled with the implications. Near the end of our exploration, Dr. Brooks took us back to the main table. She offered us refreshments again, which we politely declined, still unsure what might be safe. You've seen enough now to understand why we can't simply greet your council as naive children. We're prepared for that moment. But whether we stand as adversaries or allies remains an open question. That's largely for your council to decide, and for you to influence with your report. She glanced at the time readout. By my estimate, your delegation will enter low orbit in about 18 hours. We can give you safe passage to wherever you need to go to make your final extraction, where you can remain here and greet them with us. I rubbed the back of my elongated crest, wishing the council had provided a manual for this. I need to inform them that you're more developed than we realized, that you have pieces of technology that could compromise them if hostilities broke out. She nodded. That would be wise. If the council attempts a show of force to intimidate us, some factions on Earth might escalate in turn. We're not as robust as you are technologically, but we specialize in asymmetrical responses. I suspect it would get messy fast. Czar, who had been quiet, spoke up softly. It doesn't have to end in conflict. The Council does have protocols for mutual cooperation with emerging species. If we demonstrate that humans are advanced enough to be considered near equals, membership is an option. Membership with conditions, Crom muttered darkly. The Council rarely allows a new race to join unconditionally. There would be oversight, demands, technology licensing. Humans might chafe under that. Dr. Brooks's calm mask slipped for a fraction of a second. We're willing to negotiate, but we won't be subjugated. If the Council tries to treat us like a colony, I assure you that will fail. We adapt, we innovate, and we can fight if cornered. The silence stretched. We all understood the stakes. The Council, for all its flaws, was generally pragmatic. If it saw a species as a real threat, it might impose quarantines or preemptive strikes. But if the Council recognized the potential benefits of cooperation, it might open the door to partnership. Our job was to guide that decision. Should we highlight humanity's destructive wars, their nuclear capabilities, their penchant for internal conflict? Or should we emphasize their resilience, creativity, and capacity for forging new alliances? Finally, Dr. Brooks escorted us back to the underground parking area where the vehicle awaited. Theo still sat at the driver's seat, gazing straight ahead. One final time, we prepared ourselves for the outside world. Our disguises shimmered back into place, rendering us once more as unremarkable humans, albeit ones with slightly off-fashion sense. Dr. Brooks offered her hand in a gesture of farewell, something Earth humans do too, signify respect or agreement. Her skin was warm to the touch, a reminder of the difference between our species, yet also of the potential bridging of that gap. Thank you for hearing us out, she said. I trust you'll make your recommendation wisely. Let it reflect both our flaws and our strengths. Ultimately, I suspect you'll come to the same conclusion we did. The deadliest person in the room is rarely the loudest. It's usually the one watching quietly from the corner, prepared to act the moment the opportunity arises. I repeated those words in my mind. They summed up my entire experience of Earth so far. From the vantage point of an outside observer, humans were messy, contradictory, and frequently violent. But beneath that chaos lay cunning watchers. The Council had never faced a species quite like this, at least not in the time span of my career. Usually, we discovered new civilizations either in a state of naive wonder or in a post-violence unification. Humans straddle the line, balancing precariously between great self-destruction and extraordinary leaps forward. Dr. Brooks was living proof of that duality. Theo drove us in silence through the city streets, eventually dropping us near an inconspicuous building where we could slip back to our hidden vantage point. After departing, my team conferred quietly about our next move. The more I weighed the evidence, the more I leaned toward an unprecedented solution, an honest account that recognized humanity's capacity for advanced subterfuge and tremendous growth potential, along with a willingness to engage diplomatically. It was a gamble, but if we recommended containment, Earth's watchers might detect the Council's intentions instantly and turn the entire planet into a fortress. Given a decade or two, they could be unstoppable. Better to extend trust cautiously than to start a conflict that no side could truly contain. Back at our concealed observation post, I compiled a more detailed transmission to the Council. I included references to advanced scanning devices, partial data from alien crafts, and the existence of at least one coalition dedicated to preparing for contact. I urged calm. Meanwhile, I told Kra and the others to be on high alert. We had no idea if Dr. Brooks or her allies were monitoring us. Yet if she was, she'd see that we chose to represent humanity not as mindless aggressors, nor as naive primitives, but as complex beings capable of cooperation. We never received a direct reply from the Council. We simply detected a shift in the main diplomatic cruiser's approach vector, confirming that they had read and acted on our update. That alone was a small victory. It meant the Council might reconsider a grandiose display of technological might. They might come prepared to meet a hidden equal. The critical test would unfold in less than a day. Until then, my team made final preparations to either greet the Council's landing party ourselves or slip away if the situation turned hostile. Curiously, in the hours that followed, we spotted no further sign of Dr. Brooks. Our sensors picked up no unusual electromagnetic spikes, no shadowy figure in the crowds. It was as though she had vanished. Given everything we learned, I didn't find it surprising. She was precisely the type to step out of sight when her work was done, leaving us to wonder whether she had been the orchestrator of everything. I stepped onto the balcony of our vantage point just before dawn. The city below glowed with thousands of artificial lights. In a few hours, it would be broad daylight, and the Council's cruiser might appear in the sky for all to see. Perhaps this entire world would change forever. Perhaps not. Either way, I couldn't help reflecting on the complexity of humanity. It was easy to see why the rowdy ambassador or the stern security chief would grab the spotlight. But in the end, the real danger, or perhaps the real promise, lay with the unseen watchers who recognized power in knowing more than anyone else realized they knew. I told myself that we had done our duty. The Council wanted to know who posed the greatest threat on Earth. The first day we arrived, we assumed it was the largest figure, the loudest voice, the seat of political or military might. Now we understood that the greatest threat often wore an unremarkable face, drifting at the periphery, quietly collecting every secret. Dr. Eliana Brooks. She exemplified the old adage we'd read in the briefing. The deadliest human in the room is always the one no one notices. Perhaps in a few cycles, when the Council updated the official archives, a new line would appear in the guidelines for contact with emerging species. It might say something like, "Beware the quiet watchers." If so, I would smile, remembering how thoroughly one unassuming human had turned our entire operation inside out. In that sense, Dr. Brooks wasn't just deadly. She was transformative, forcing us to question everything we knew about the shapes and forms that threats could take. With the horizon lightening, I closed my eyes for a moment. In my mind, I saw Earth's future unfold in two branching paths. One path led to a fruitless conflict, spurred by mutual distrust. Another led to a cautious friendship, out of which both sides might grow and learn. In that uncertain moment, the decision teetered on the edge of how we, the advanced observers, portrayed humankind. We had the power to tilt the scale. In that sense, we too were watchers, deciding whether to announce what we'd seen of humanity's hidden nature or to brush it aside. When the time came to meet the council delegates, I intended to speak the truth. We had found Earth more advanced, more cunning, and more prepared than any other emerging species in recent memory. Yet we had also encountered at least one human who sought not to fight, but to show us exactly what we needed to see for a safer future. Yes, Dr. Brooks was dangerous in her understated mastery of information, in her ability to detect us, corner us, and present us with a proposition we couldn't refuse. But her danger cut both ways. For if she wanted war, she could have laid a far more devious trap. Instead, she gave us the chance to rewrite the standard script. That was not the hallmark of a conqueror. It was the hallmark of a species that understood the precarious balance between power and cooperation. Even if she was alone in that mindset, her existence changed my team's entire perspective. We too had to adapt. Our illusions, advanced devices, and preconceived categories weren't enough. Our real advantage came from meeting people like her face-to-face, bridging differences through a shared willingness to learn. That, I realized with a hint of irony, might be the greatest lesson in all of this. In trying to determine which human was the most lethal threat, we uncovered that the real power on Earth lay with those who moved unseen, shaping the future in quiet, deliberate steps. I opened a comm link to my team. This is Commander Andrax. Report status. One by one, they confirmed they were ready for the next phase. If the council delegates arrived peacefully, we would facilitate a meeting. If they arrived with aggression, we would do our best to defuse hostilities. We had no illusions about controlling humanity. We could only hope that knowledge, on both sides, would guide them toward a stable truce. Before shutting off the link, I added, and keep an eye out. Dr. Brooks might reappear at any time. We owe her our thanks and a measure of caution. I imagined her then, sipping tea or coffee in some hidden vantage point of her own, calmly analyzing the signals that told her how Earth's new day would unfold. Perhaps she was conferring with other watchers, Olivia, Marcus, who knew how many. The entire planet might be dotted with individuals like that, prepared in ways the Council never suspected. If only a fraction of them shared her mindset, humanity would be a formidable addition to galactic society. And so ended our quiet night of revelations, overshadowed by the knowledge that we only had hours before the Council's main cruiser descended. By the time the sun was fully above the horizon, we would no longer be mere observers. We would be mediators in a drama that could reshape the galaxy's approach to first contact. As we left our vantage point to rendezvous with the Council's landing team, I found myself repeating that phrase in my head once more, why the deadliest human in the room is always the one no one notices. It was a lesson I would carry forever, a reminder that in this vast cosmos, the most profound dangers and the greatest hopes are often hidden behind the most unassuming faces. Humanity, for all its flaws, possessed quiet watchers who understood the power of knowledge and the subtlety of preparation. And that might prove both terrifying and deeply promising for the future we were about to share.